Very loud, isn't it? It's a good test for the microphones. So if we're all ready, I'm just going to count us down for the IT side to know that we're going into the
welcome everybody to the meeting. Welcome in particular today to the Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Chief Fire Officer, and our new panel member or returning panel member, Councillor Kevin Foster. And I also want to welcome our returning co-opted members and our new co-opted members, and we'll talk about them subsequent in the meeting. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Please, speakers, remember to use microphones to help with the amplification in this room. I'm told that there isn't a fire test today, so if the alarm sounds, please proceed down the stairs past the reception out into the car park. Move on to item 1, which is apologies. Diane, I think we've got 3 apologies, 2 substitutes. We'd like to record those.
Yes, thank you. We've got apologies from Councillor Heather Morehouse, and we have as a substitute Councillor Greg White for her. Also apologies from Councillor Emily Knight. We have Councillor Andrew Waller representing, and we also have apologies from Councillor Michael Pavlovic.
Thank you. I will move on to agenda item 2, declaration of interest. Mags, I'll reach out to you.
Yes, I'm Chief Exec Officer of Survive, which receives money from the Deputy Mayor's Office for counselling for victims of domestic and sexual violence.
Mags, thank you for that, and we'll ensure these are noted in the minutes. Agenda item 3, members, consideration of the exclusion of the public. Can the panel perhaps agree that we retain the right to keep item 9 closed session on the agenda and to determine whether this is required after consideration of the fire and rescue precept proposal item 8? Could I seek a show of hands to approve this? Thank you. Any members against? That's passed. Thank you very much. Agenda item 4, minutes of the panel meeting held on the 8th of October 2025. Are members happy that these... Have we got a seconder? Thank you very much. Diane, can you note that these have been approved as an accurate record? Agenda item 5, appointment of the panel's co-opted independent members. Members, as you know, a task group from the panel led on a recruitment exercise for 3 co-opted independent members in the autumn. As the paper outlines, we had a very strong field of applicants from a wide range of backgrounds, and we selected 8 for interview. As a result, I'm delighted to propose 3 appointees to you this afternoon. 2 other returning members, Mags Goodridge and Fraser Forsyth, and we're also joined by Caroline O'Neill, who was recently retired from many years working in the voluntary sector. Our co-opted members have a 4-year tenure. We do not know what future scrutiny ranges around policing, fire and crime will be, but it's important that we ensure continuity of robust scrutiny in the meantime. As such, I'm asking for your approval of our appointees. Please can I have a proposer and seconder? Danny proposed. David second. Can I have a show of hand, members? Thank you. And can I welcome Caroline to the panel, and congratulations to Mags and Fraser for the reappointment. As the paper also noticed, I've ensured that formal thanks are given to our outgoing member, Martin Walker. I've spoken to him personally, and we've also written to him to thank him for his service. And can I also record my thanks to Mara for our recent input into the induction of both Caroline and Caroline Foster's. Diane, I'll move on to agenda item 6, public questions or statements. None have been received, is my understanding.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair.
Okay. Can I then move on to agenda item 7, provisional police settlement and setting the police precept for 2026-27. Members, this is on page 21 to 36 of your papers. This paper is effectively a precept paper setting out the details on the provisional settlement for police funding and highlighting the precept consultation outcomes along with certain levels of increase, and what certain levels of increase may mean for the force. We'll be, of course, taking the Mayor's formal proposals in our meeting in February. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, we've read the paper and we've also had a very welcome briefing with Michael Porter, for which I would like to thank him and acknowledge. Is there anything, Mayor or Deputy Mayor, that you would like to add to your paper?
Thank you, Chair. All right. Okay. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, so I mean, I suppose what we just want to touch on really, before if Michael did want to talk through the paper any more depth, I suppose just looking at the 3 sort of main principles, just looking at the main principles that we've sort of outlined and to consider when we are putting through a precept. And the 3 main principles are looking at the minimal possible burden on local taxpayers, having an effective, well-managed public service that keep people safe and deliver value for money, and also delivering on local public priorities for both services, including improving the safety on our roads. So whenever we're looking through our precept, particularly on police and fire, is making sure that we are hitting those 3 criteria. Obviously, I think it's incredibly important that obviously whenever we're asking the public to increase any precept, we are asking the public to pay more money. But I think we also need to take that into context of making sure our frontline services, police and fire, are both fit for purpose, but also we are future-proofing and helping them be able to evolve and meet the ever-growing demand and challenges that both police and fire do face. Thank you, Chair.
Please, if I may, Chair, thank you. Just really to just outline in the results of the consultation that took place and closed on the 5th of January, just building on what the Mayor said about the principles that he'd set out in that consultation. I mean, actually all 3 had really high levels of positive response from the public. I was quite surprised in some ways about the order in which, even though all 3 were very, very high in terms of that response, actually the top one in terms of the public was actually ensuring that we have effective, well-managed public services that keep people safe in our region and deliver value for money, which has been was the first thing that people asked us to consider. Then they asked us to ensure that we were delivering on local priorities for both services, including improving the safety of our roads in our region. And the third thing from the public's perspective was around the minimum possible burden on council taxpayers, which I was quite surprised about, but actually all 3 of them were incredibly high in terms of the response from the public. The only other thing I wanted to say was that the final decision about the precept level hasn't been made, but there will be the presentation to panel. I think it's 2 weeks' time. And just to add that David and I have sought assurances from North Yorkshire Police about the difference in the 2 options in terms of precept for policing, which would be broadly the £14 or the £15 flexibility that was allowed by the government this year. We've sought assurances and from the police about what difference that would make in terms of the service that we'd be able to deliver, that would be able to be delivered for the public in North Yorkshire. And just separately, because this only happened in this last week, we have had notification from the government about their expectations around neighbourhood policing. from the government. That's come quite late in the day and has only been considered since Monday, the beginning of this week, by Michael Porter. But that David and I have also made representation to the Home Secretary off the back of that, partly to ensure that the government are aware of the challenges of delivering rural policing in a county like ours. And also in light of the police reform white paper, which we're expecting to be published next week. So I just wanted to add that further context to that, so that panel were aware in advance of the paper, the formal paper that's coming on I think it's the 5th of February, isn't it? Yeah.
Chair, may I just add, the letter we'll send through to yourself and the panel so they can see that letter as well, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. Yes, you're correct. 2 weeks' time we'll be having the formal meeting. Members, I think we've got a number of questions. Kevin, I believe you had a question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I mean, it's on about the Mayor has just said about future proofing, and in the papers, it's estimated 5.2 million. 13% of capital programmes will be funded by additional borrowing to fund estate expenditure only. Is that for just this 1 year, 5.2 million? And is it possible to have the figures, what the total figure of the borrowing is at the moment? Thank you very much.
So I can answer that one. So the £5.2 million is currently the expected borrowing across the entirety of the plan. We do only expect to borrow for estates investment. Clearly, if there are additional estates programmes that come on board, we will reflect those in the plans going forward. But based on the current plan, it's £5.2 million that we plan to borrow. In terms of the current level of borrowing for the police, police only has £6 million worth of borrowing currently.
Caroline, I believe your first question.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, firstly, I do want to say well done on the survey. I think the response is tremendous. I also was very pleased to see the age profile on there. I think it's been very useful to give us, direction as to what people are saying. What I wanted to talk about was the core government grant, and obviously it's outlined in the paper, but in particular in preparation for the February fuller discussion of the police investment plan. And really what I felt would be useful is for us to have an indication of the factors that make up that core grant. And the reason for that is to see how they link perhaps with other mayoral responsibilities and local authority responsibilities, to see how we can really join up those aspects of investment across partners as well as within the mayoral portfolio as well. So it was really an ask for the paper for February, please.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And certainly partnership working is one of the priorities in the police and crime plan. So absolutely, we're looking for all and every opportunity to do that. But we can absolutely reflect that in the February paper, and the Chief Constable will be at that February meeting. So you'll be able to raise any other kind of operational questions with him then as well.
Could I ask that the paper itself lists out the factors that make up the calculation by government of the core grant?
So we could absolutely provide that information. It is in the public domain. It's unbelievably complicated, and I think a health warning in terms of the fact that the funding formula from a policing perspective hasn't been run for a number of years, and therefore it's not likely to be as reflective as it should be of current levels of need and demand. But we can absolutely set you out the factors or provide a link certainly to it. It's a really riveting read.
Okay, a quick summary of them would be really helpful. Thanks.
Chris?
Thank you, Chair. This is probably a question for Michael rather than Joe or David, but I'm just a little bit concerned about reserves. I noticed the overall reserves are going to be reduced due to contributions to the capital plan. I'm just seeking some reassurance that we're still within the equation where we need to have reserves. And how does that compare to other authorities? Do you have any knowledge on that?
Okay, happy to take that, Chair. So in terms of the our reserves policy and strategy, we set out that we must have a minimum of 3% in our general fund, and we will make sure that that is absolutely the same across the entirety of the plan. That will require us to put some money into our general reserve each and every year as we move forward. So we've got that factored in. The rest of our reserves are there for very particular reasons. So to help us with some risk management around what happens if the pay award is higher than we were expecting, what happens if we get unexpected insurance claims, whether or not there are major incidents, and to provide us with some funding to help support our capital programme. As an accountant, I'd love to have more in reserves. Who wouldn't like to have more in their savings account? But it's obviously important for us to get that balance between reserves that we hold to make sure that we cover off the risks and ensuring that we can also deliver as much as possible in terms of day-to-day service delivery. We are hopeful as we move forward through the plan that once we get to that £14 million, we will be able to build up that reserves a little bit more. But I think I'm comfortable with it as it currently is. That helps.
Thanks.
Thank you. I guess cuts from central government are highly likely, and it's alluded to in the report. I guess I'm wanting to know what the impact of those cuts are going to be on delivering things locally, in particular things like violence against women and girls strategy and neighbourhood policing, which I know have been priorities in recent years.
Yeah, so obviously we have seen some funding cuts, which is never great, obviously. It's obviously where the wider CA piece can come in, actually where we can link, and I think touching slightly on your point earlier on, Caroline, about how across the CA we have the opportunity to actually link and have a much more joined-up approach about how we can nullify some of those cuts, and actually how we can see some of the work that's happening in the combined authority side of things through the movement activity and sport, through the men's mental health and through other areas, about how we can make sure that we are getting the most bang for our buck. We know we are in financially challenging times nationally. It isn't just York and North Yorkshire, it's everywhere, and it's making sure that we are joining up the approach so actually we can use much more of the CA side of the powers and control and funding we have there to make sure that we are getting that cross team working, I suppose. We're not working in isolation, so we can make things go a lot further for what we have. In terms of operational terms of police, obviously I'll leave that to the Chief Constable to expand on those pieces, but so from our perspective, we are always exploring about the better ways we can work and make sure we do have that joined up approach, not just with what the combined authorities do, and make sure we're working well with the VCSE sector, with both local authorities, to make sure that the money we do have is being targeted in the right place and we are getting the most out of it. I think that's the strength of the model with having combined authorities, mayoral powers and police and fire, is actually we have an opportunity to particularly challenge some of that early intervention, prevention work, particularly inside the crime area, around what we're looking to do in terms of our adult skills funding, for example. So we have an opportunity to actually target things a different way. I think we all probably realise that you don't always want a police officer going into a certain situation. Sometimes working with community groups and organisations is the best way forward, and the links the combined authority have to actually do that work, I think, is a real strength, particularly in the financial challenging times we know York and North Yorkshire, generally speaking, does always kind of get overlooked for funding as well, because of the fact we don't have the population density and the high levels of deprivation that other areas do see. And obviously government quite rightly is realigning funding more towards high levels of deprivation. That said, we know in York and North Yorkshire we have those real deep challenging pockets of deprivation. In times it's almost street to street. So it's a lot more focus that we have to be into, working with organisations who are in the ground, who are embedded in communities, is how we're going to be able to combat those challenges. And that's hopefully what the CA on our side of things can do to support the work of the PFC as well.
Hi, I was just going to give you hopefully some specifics, Mags, and then if you want to come back. So just to give you a few examples, so the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy obviously was only published a few weeks ago, but we are already looking at how we convene better in that space to join things together between both delivery partners, but also kind of people who wouldn't naturally be around the table around violence against women and girls. So transport partners, businesses, health partners, trying to make sure that actually that whole system approach that we've been taking for quite a long time in York and North North Yorkshire around reducing violence against women and girls, that actually we kind of embed that in terms of our own local delivery of that strategy. And then just on the wider kind of how we kind of make the money go a bit further. So, for example, this morning I met with the 2 community safety partnerships for York and North Yorkshire and talked to them about the work that they're doing and how we do that better to pick up the issues that are frustrating for them and how I can advocate for them, for example, through the local Criminal Justice Partnership Board. I met with the 2 transport exec members for the 2 local authorities yesterday or possibly Monday, again to talk about road safety and how we can do that effectively in partnership, delivering what's going to work for us in our patch in view of the new national road safety strategy which came out at the beginning of the year, and then just trying to make sure that we're using our convening powers, particularly with the voluntary and community sector, but probably more importantly with health partners, to make sure that everyone is coming round the table who we need round the table, to make sure that we're making the most of the money that we've got, as David said, across all the different pots that are available in the combined authority, but to deliver on the kind of strategic objectives and the missions that David set for his term as mayor.
Thanks. I'll start with a compliment to the paper. It was a lot easier to find information this year and detail around it than I have in previous years. My question is around about level of confidence in the inflation projection at 2%. Morningstar are forecasting 2.3, 2.4%, and I noticed this morning's headline rate was well above 3% above forecast. With the margins being so tight on everything, cost pressure has been so high, how confident are you in that 2% inflation forecast being robust?
Take that one for you, Chair. We think it's a reasonable estimate. There is a target for the kind of the inflation rate to come down to 2%. So we based many of our assumptions on that. We do reflect particular areas of inflationary increases if we know about them. And the other thing that I would point out is what we haven't got included in the plans and what I will expect both police and fire to deliver as we go forward are efficiencies within those numbers. So if we've got a increase that shows us 2% and the organisation makes 1% efficiencies, it should provide them with enough capacity to deal with 3. So that's the kind of the parameters we work on when we're looking at the budget. So I'm comfortable with the 2. The organisation will have to deliver efficiencies as we expect to be able to probably provide for higher levels of inflation in some areas.
Thank you, Chair. Question really follows up on the query on neighbourhood policing. I think visible policing is something that many people see as a return on their precept payments. And given that North Yorkshire is not funded in the same way that other areas are in terms of responsibilities for policing, that the neighbourhood policing budget comes under even more pressure. So to read that there's such a significant shortfall in that and in the antisocial behaviour hotspot funding, it does worry me as to how any increase will be explained away when people are not seeing the police in their neighbourhoods as frequently as they previously did.
Well, thank you for your question. So we know that the national priority is obviously increase neighbourhood police and more bobbies on the beat, so to speak. Obviously, we have seen an increase in police numbers over recent times. I won't obviously speak on operational behalf for the Chief Constable, but I know there's a focus there on that neighbourhood policing as well, and that's what I know that Chief Constable, myself, Joe, and national government are focused in on, and I think we've already started to see those numbers increasing already in our patch. And obviously, people do want to see police numbers on the street, absolutely, but it's more than that as well. It's not just about having a police officers on the street. It's actually about making sure that the force is fit for purpose and structured in a way that it actually meets the requirements of the people as well. So it's not necessarily you always need that extra police officer on the street. It's actually the whole system approach to make sure that we are not only targeting crime in those hotspots, but making sure that crimes are going reported and through the whole process, and giving residents and the public alike the confidence that crimes are being picked up and reported and dealt with. It's not always that you need people on the front line. It's actually looking at efficiencies across the system, but also making sure the systems are fit for purpose in the back office as well to actually deal with the challenges of increased crimes that we unfortunately will always see. So it is obviously I won't go into the operational, but I think, yes, I agree. But obviously we need to be seeing more police on the street, but also we need to be making sure that the whole structure and system is working properly as well.
Thanks. I hope the Chief Constable won't mind. I'm just going to quote from his letter to the Home Secretary, which he only sent yesterday, which is why it won't have been circulated more widely. But this is just in response to the government's neighbourhood policing settlement that came out. We didn't get ours till Monday, actually, but just and I think it's a really valid point that Councillor Waller's making, because I think we've had the neighbourhood policing review in North Yorkshire, which panel members will be aware of because we've had papers on it over the last few months. And obviously we've had a big uptick in our neighbourhood policing kind of capacity overall in the last year because of the 1.9 million additional funding that came last year, which and we've had a restructure of neighbourhood policing, which is refocused where the demand on the teams was highest. But just to quote the Chief Constable's letter, because I just thought it might be useful for Councillor Waller, but I think during 25-26, so to year to date this year, this is neighbourhood policing response and neighbourhood crime has fallen 9.4% because of the focus that the force has been taking, strengthened leadership and a clear plan to focus on the basics. That's in North Yorkshire. I do think Councillor Waller is right that we have an issue with public confidence, and not every community in York and North Yorkshire is perhaps reporting crime and antisocial behaviour, particularly in the neighbourhoods as often as others. And it's really, really important that if we're going to build and maintain our levels of public confidence in North Yorkshire Police, that we encourage the public to make sure they're reporting problems in the neighbourhood and antisocial behaviour, so that we've got an accurate picture to work from, but based on the data of reporting.
Would it be possible to see a copy of this letter that's been sent?
So it's not my letter. So I would just need to ask the Chief Constable if he's happy for that to go into the public domain, but he's coming to the next meeting, so hopefully it can be made public, but it's not my letter.
Thank you. Members, any more questions on this paper? Thank you for the paper and the response. We'll note this report and we look forward to receiving the formal proposals next month. I'll move on to agenda item 8, Mayor's draft final budget 2026-27 and the fire and rescue precept proposal. Members, it's page 37 to 74 in the bundle. I'll start with item 8A, panel scrutiny of the fire precept proposal. Panel, we're asked to note this for guidance. Is there any questions on the guidance? So we have noted the distinction in our remit and that of the MCA in relation to decision making around the fire precept. I'll now move on to item 18B, the draft 2026-27 fire budget and medium-term financial plan proposal, pages 39 to 74. Would you like to speak to the proposals that are being put forward today?
Yes, I was going to speak to 8A, but happy if you want to jump into 8B as well. That's fine. Sorry. Yeah, 8B now. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of the fire budget and medium-term financial plan proposal, so the report sets out the implications for North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue. Obviously, we know that we had a rather large black hole in terms of funding through fire and rescue service from 2011 to 2014 through freezes, and obviously I welcome the panel support in the precept that we raised last year to particularly shore up the fire and rescue service, which was in an incredibly challenging financial situation. And obviously we've seen with recent times in terms of the Langdale fire over the summertime, which put a huge strain on our resources, and it's making sure that our fire and rescue service in particular is fit for purpose, as I stated at the start, that we are going through in terms of different challenges, I suppose, for the fire and rescue service, and things like more wildfires, flooding, and such like. So it's making sure that we not only have a fire and rescue service that does sort of, I suppose, fundamentally the basics, but also is evolving with the ever-changing climate that we are having to deal with. So again, making sure that they are financially on a stable footing, but also managing sure that we are recovering from the financial challenge we've had in the past, but also making sure we've got that investment coming into fire and rescue service so they can be also supported and they can get the right training and equipment and can evolve their assets and their fleet to make sure that we are well resourced moving forward. I think also just touching on points raised earlier on about also that public assurance and public confidence, making sure that people see that we are supporting and we are financially supporting and making sure that our fire and rescue service is fit for purpose, and that also gives the confidence into the public. Again, I think we saw over the summer, obviously the fire and rescue service did an incredible job with Langdale Fire, and I think we saw that the public support and confidence in our fire and rescue service was there, but obviously we need to make sure that they are fit for purpose and they have that financial backing to be able to go and evolve and press forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things, and a couple of members of panel have already referenced the consultation responses, but I just wanted, if it's okay with you, Chair, just to thank a few people who had done an incredible amount of work, particularly over Christmas, on that consultation process for both the Fire and Rescue Service precept and the police precept. So as well as the police, fire and crime officers who are here today, so Tamara Stevens, Mark Ayres and Amalda Wilkinson, there are a number of people who wouldn't normally attend panel who I just wanted to take the chance to thank, because they were working a lot over the Christmas period and regularly do, in order to ensure that panel get the papers that they need for these meetings. So Fiona Kinnear, Polly Etheridge and Rebecca Smith, and then particularly the ones who were literally out trying to ensure that the demographics of our representation were as balanced as we managed to get them over the Christmas period. Rebecca Proctor from the communications team, Sheila Forder, Hannah Nash and Emma Dorey, who have been out and about making sure that those surveys were being filled in and trying to ensure that we have the best possible representation from the demographic groups in our region, which is always challenging, and it's still really frustrating for me that York is underrepresented, as is Scarborough, despite their very, very best efforts in York trying to get those numbers up over the Christmas period. But I just wanted to thank them personally in this setting, if that's all right with you. And the only other thing I would add to what David, the Mayor, has said is just really around road safety being such a priority for us, partly because it fits so clearly in our prevention space, and that funding for the Road Safety Partnership was previously sourced from excess funds that were left over from COVID. That runs out in April, so it's really important for us that we look again at how that partnership's been working and what we need to do to put it once again on a stable footing, so that we don't lose momentum in terms of road safety in the region, and that we can work, as Mags asked in her question earlier, in partnership across the combined authority, looking at what grants are available through, for example, transport funds, to look at what else we can do in terms of capital and engineering to support the two local authorities with that work as well. So I I hope that was okay to draw attention to all the people who've done so much work on that consultation.
Reach out to members. We've got a long list of members who want to ask questions. I'll go to Caroline first.
Thank you, Chair. It was really in the context of the risk management plan that is referenced in the report, and it's actually connected with the work you may be doing, or if you could sort of give us an indication of the work you're doing to thoroughly embed and encourage the communities, be it parish or town councils, to look at their own emergency plans and engage people in that. Thinking about what was said earlier about confidence of the public, then sometimes it's working with bodies such as your own that would help build that confidence. So it's really a question about what you're doing to engage communities in developing their own emergency plans, best particularly mentioning fire and floods. That really did engage people over the past year. So I just want to Thanks.
Thank you. So my voice gone. Thank you. That's a great question. As we saw with the Langdale fire and the communities and the response, it truly was a community response. And from my leadership perspective, the future of fire can only be embedded within not just consultation, but also engagement and also collaboration with communities. Communities and community resilience, as you'll note within the community risk management plan, is a core focus of what we're trying to achieve, because not only do we as a service then have to protect the communities, but we help them to protect themselves and help them be more resilient in their approach. We have a wide ranging focus through, as you'll read in the CRMP, of what we engage with current communities and community leaders, and that's something that we'll continue to do. Where we highlight specific areas of risk, once again, we approach the communities to help us understand the risk, to understand what we need to help them to deliver a change in there, but more importantly, again, what they can do in their own areas. Now, from a flooding perspective, as we've seen in some of the neighbouring counties, there are actions that you can take as flooding wardens and even for us, wildfire potentially within this space. So I believe we're doing everything we can currently to deliver what we need to for this CRMP. What I think we need to do better is help communities, one, engage with us in that space, including community leaders and everybody in that space, and then people to understand their own place in making themselves more resilient as well. Thank you.
That's excellent, thank you. And I think also it would help build lots of relationships, including future staffing. It would interest people in what you're doing in that respect. So thanks for that.
Chris, I believe you've got a question.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I've just got a short one to the Mayor and then maybe one to the Deputy Mayor. But the Mayor, I just want to clarify, David, sorry. Last year, the only preset you used was for the fire brigade. And, we all ought to thank you for that, because we all know what the dire circumstances the force was in. And if you hadn't put that precept out there, it would have been even worse. So thank you for that. Is that your intention this year? You've only got the fire service at precept for, or are we likely to get anything else?
No, that's it. So obviously you'll know that it's not a fire precept, it's a mayoral precept. So I can precept for essentially anything that I have control over. So for example, like transport or such else, but it's for fire, as we did.
But it's all allocated to fire.
Yeah, and the fire and those responsibilities of the fire.
Which is great. Yeah. So thank you again for that. My main question though was about the rationale for the assumption of the 2.5 for the support staff pay award. And I'm a little bit concerned about that. Sorry. I'm always quiet. No, it was about the assumption on the 2.5% for the staff pay award. Because the Office for Budgetary Responsibility, their assumption nationally is that weekly earnings will grow up by 3.5%. I know there's a pay claim already been submitted, which is way above, obviously it's not going to go to what is being claimed, but it's way above 2.5%. And then when you add days off and pension things in to that, it's actually quite a high claim there. So I'm just wondering why we're assuming 2.5% when it wasn't that last year. It was more than that. And the Office of Budget Responsibility is actually saying it's going to be at least 3.5% nationally this year. Why are we going for 2.5%?
I'll bring Michael Porton on this, because I know we have had a lot of chats around this conversation.
Absolutely. So thank you for that. The broad assumption is that absolutely, is that better? So the reason for the assumption was that last year we had a pay award that was 3.2%. General consensus seems to be that inflation will fall and is falling, and therefore we've factored in that it'll be in and around 2.5% this year. So when we look at these types of assumptions within our budget, we also reflect on what other parameters that we have to absorb anything that's higher than that. And one of the benefits that we've had over the last 12 months is we've been able to bolster our reserves. So what we have within our reserves now is a pay and price reserve. And should anything happen where the pay awards are higher than that, then we will use that pay reserve to fund that. So we think we've got the balance right between the two. But we are mindful that it could be higher than that. But we'll deal with that as we need to.
Danny?
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank you all for the report. And I'll say at the beginning that I'm really supportive of the work you're doing here on the fire budget and of your proposals. I just wanted to ask a couple of specific questions in relation to non-pay pressures. So it's 3.51 in the report, and it's about contracts. So premises costs, I think, are largely self-explanatory in the report, but it's quite a high figure. And you mention that there's a new contract to improve maintenance. I'd be interested to understand what that involves. Secondly, transport costs. Again, the report notes that there are higher third-party maintenance and parts costs. And then the last one will be about PFI. In the budget, we can see a big decrease in PFI. I'm attributing that to Easingwold. But I wonder of the remaining contracts, if you've got any information about the duration beyond the medium term on those PFIs. Thank you.
So thank you for those questions. I'll take them in reverse order, if that's okay. So the PFI one first. So we are approaching the end of our PFI contract. So the PFI contract ends in May 2027. So we're into almost the last 12 months of that contract. So what you're seeing in the budget this year is that there's some increases in relation to contractual charges for RPI. So it's linked to RPI, so it'll go up. And then what you see at the end of that is that the amount that we will pay for it will drop down significantly. So that's like your household where you've stopped paying your mortgage. You still got to pay for all of your bills. You just don't have to pay your money to the bank anymore. So that's what happens in May 2027. The ownership of those buildings will pass to the mayor. I think there's a contractual requirement for us to pay £10, but it will pass to the mayor to that point. And from a operational perspective, they will continue to deliver in the same way as they have done. It's just likely that the arrangements will be slightly different, is that there won't be a PFI provider involved. Okay. In terms of the question in relation to transport and the increases in the costs there, so obviously the organisation has its own facility to deal with some elements of transport and mechanics, and we've got an approach in place that has almost a dual thing. So some elements of our fleet are looked after locally within there. Some of them need to go to third parties or require parts from third parties to be able to deal with those. So that's a reflection of the fact that we've put in arrangements next year that we think we will need to use more third parties to deliver a required fleet, because we have some vacancies within those teams, and that we think we'll need to use a larger number of third parties to deliver that for us instead of staff whilst we recruit into those. The first question was, could you remind me on the first question? Sorry.
Yeah. No, thank you for your answers. It's on premises and the contract to improve maintenance.
Oh, absolutely. So I think members will be aware that one of the things that we've been really clear about, and one of the things we've been open about, is the fact that the estates from a fire perspective haven't been invested in the way that we would have liked over a number of years. So what we've done now is we've put a contract in place with the police, and we've jointly procured a contract that will look at the repairs and maintenance of the entire estate. What that will provide is a more reactive and more suppose, embedded service to the people who use those estates. So repairs and maintenance and call outs will be done in 24 or 48 hours, and they won't have to sit there for quite as long. But also they've done a whole review of the estate and planned out what we need to do to be able to bring it up to a certain standard. So that's why we're investing in that area.
Yep, thank you. Thank you for the answers, Michael. Appreciate that. I just did want to follow up on the transport one and the parts, and try to understand the longer term strategy of whether the vacancies in the directly employed transport team would be, is it an aim to fill it, and or is it a longer term plan to continue to contract out for those services?
Thank you, Councillor. And just before I answer that question, thank you once again for the support for the plan. Now, I'll try and answer it just as an operational perspective on those as well, including the other three questions. So transport and supplies is something that we are always very much aware of, because ultimately those big red trucks that deliver the service to the public are our statutory duty. Now, they are a very specialist vehicle. We know that they cost in excess of £250,000 each time. That's something that we have to significantly plan for. Now, notwithstanding, we have replaced 16 of those new vehicles within this MTFP, which for North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service is enormous and a significant investment for us, both for staff and for the public. Now, where we start to meet the challenges is then the ever and evolving risks that the public faces, because our vehicles and our staff, they need to meet those risks. So we're already trying to plan now around what the next evolution of those appliances will look like. And that includes our staff as well, because the specialist staff that we need to maintain and do all of those vehicles has for North Yorkshire been very challenging to maintain recruitment of. When we look at the salaries we're able to offer as true parity across the public sector compared to into a commercial entity, it's very difficult for us to step into that space. So in some areas, we would then reduce staffing in those areas from people leaving or from people seeking other opportunities. So we did go for external contracts in there to maintain that provision. I want to, and we are committed to, we've made the documentation on there, we want to get back up to full strength in-house to maintain that provision. But because of the current market supply and demand that's on there, we've been short in those, hence Michael then discussing those vacancies. So yes, the commitment is there. We will absolutely step into there, and we are doing. We've recently increased by quite a significant margin our offer to staff in there to help maintain within there. But of course, money talks and people do seek other opportunities. It hits us because of the training then that takes to bring them in. On a PFI position as well, this is an opportunity for the service, because we will, or the mayor will own that estate, and hopefully then some of the funding then that we're not putting into the contractual payments allows us then to have an investment portfolio in training, which is absolutely essential for us. And again, that's clearly stipulated in both the fire and rescue plan and the community risk management plan, is our commitment to that training environment. Thank you.
Steve?
Thanks, Chair. It seems odd not standing up and throwing my arms around. Being restrained. I feel better, but I'm not going to do. Two questions. One about you alluded to the Langdale fire at the Moors. Where are we with getting the money back, which I think is crucial? And the second one is around the firefighter pension contributions, that if they are increased, do we have enough flexibility within the plan to cover that?
So on Langdale, now the Langdale funding, I'm confident, but I'll seek to Michael for the exact position that we will receive that funding and the position we're in. We did go early on that request for that specific point, because we don't carry the reserves that many of the Mets could do to then hold us into that position. And of course, without it, that will significantly change our plan. So what was the second part of the question? Pension contributions. Now, the government recently did a pension consultation through the LGA, and firefighters' pension contributions are actually decreasing slightly, but then other officers in the profile are increasing. So the stability of the pension contributions, as far as we are planning, is maintained within this current plan. Thank you. Michael?
Thank you. In terms of Langdale, we have a claim in as part of a Bellwyn scheme for about £2.6 million in relation to the costs that were over and above those costs that would naturally be incurred by the organisation. I think it's fair to say we're in active correspondence in relation to this. We've had to submit every single invoice with a line-by-line explanation as to what it was. We've had to produce information on every area of expenditure. We've had to prove that we've paid the invoices, and we're continuing to provide that level of information. So we're about to send another tranche of information through. I remain very hopeful that we'll receive the vast majority of the funding. I think it falls within the Bellwyn scheme, which is why we put it in the first place, but we do need that formal confirmation. So work on that.
Tim?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to commend the report. It's clarity. I agree with Fraser. It's far better than it was last year. But my question is in terms of reserves. I hope everyone can hear me. Good. Can you hear me, Chris? Good. So it's in terms of the rationale for decreasing the contribution for the new development and change reserve from £1 million per annum forecast in last year's medium-term financial plan to 165,000 for this year.
So absolutely. So the change reserve has been used to invest in certain areas. So one of the things I talked about earlier was the higher investment in estates contracts. So we've put some of that change reserves into that. We've also invested into our support services as well, in line with some gaps. So we've taken that out. I'd love to continue it to be £1 million. I'm sure the chief would love to have £1 million. But if we kind of reflect on the kind of the value for money and the feedback we got as part of the kind of the precept setting in terms of that balance, we have to make some balance in terms of that. So that's where we've gone. The 165 is what we've set aside to invest in road safety next year. We see that as one of the areas of investment. So would I like £1 million every year to go in the change pipeline? Absolutely. But that's probably another £3 on precept. So I think we're probably getting that balance right, I hope.
Thanks for that, Michael. I wouldn't mind £1 million.
Mags?
Thank you. Two questions. The first one was last year we put the precept up quite significantly for fire because of the need to invest in capital purchases, new vehicles, etc. I notice in the report it refers to 16 new appliances, and I'm just wanting reassurances. Are they actually going to be delivered within this financial budget as opposed to the precept one that we're looking at now?
Certainly, we've got them. So we have the appliances. It's taken us some time because of various delays to suppliers and Ukraine and other significant impacts across literally the world economy with that. But we have them. They are being rolled out now. When they come into service, they then have to be fitted out with the blue lights and the equipment and all those areas. So we have them, and you will see that rolling out across the fleet. What we do with our old appliances, we then push those out for auction. So we do try and maintain an income wherever physically possible.
That's really good to hear and reassuring after the precept rise last year. And the second question really was, obviously we understand that flooding, water risk is not a statutory responsibility for fire rescue service. And I just wondered, Mayor, what the updates are, if there are any, on how you've been lobbying Parliament over this and government to see if there can be a change.
Thanks, Max. Yeah, so Joe and I have been raising not just the flooding and challenges around wildfires and flooding particularly, but just the how rural fire and rescue services are funded. I think it's fair to say that a government traditionally has funded and understood maybe more the urban centres and sort of how funding is delivered through there. And even as mayor with the powers and funding that I have now, it's still very much geared towards those urban core city centres. And obviously now we're the first trench of non-core city regions, and obviously now incorporating police and fire as well. It's an opportunity to showcase government, how things can be delivered in a very different way, but also the importance of being able to fund an area like ours. It really doesn't just stop with fire, it's across everything we do in terms of transport, housing, everything, that we are constantly speaking to government about how we need to realign and reassess how funding is delivered, because as I touched earlier on, generally speaking, it's geared around population and levels of challenge that you may face in your region, but that geography piece it isn't often taken into consideration. And when you have an area on the scale of ours, that is obviously incredibly important, because it's our big defining factor when it comes to funding almost anything. Is it's just how big the region are. So we are constantly having those conversations with government to make sure that those factors are aligned into funding formulas across everything, not just fire and rescue.
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to add to what the Mayor just said, and also kind of to build on what Councillor Shawright asked a little earlier. Actually, not only is it about the kind of climate related risks, but also the recovery process. So obviously at Langdale, as Michael just set out, we've sent in to MHCLG via the Belwyn scheme the kind of invoice for additional costs incurred by the service of 2.6 million. But actually the Local Resilience Forum, which North Yorkshire Council coordinate, has also been overseeing the recovery process. And actually the costs associated with that are probably the same again, in terms of how you make sure that we're dealing with DEFRA and other government departments to make sure that the recovery part of that is also factored in and joined together again through the Local Resilience Forum, working with the government department. So the Mayor and I have also been making representations to other government departments on behalf of the Local Resilience Forum, who've also obviously made their own representations as well. But we're just trying to make sure that we're working in partnership on behalf of our region.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor did touch on it briefly during our introductory remarks, and it's regarding the consultation. Great to see a much more, so many more responses this year, but again, York's hugely underrepresented. Craven, Rydale and Richmond around about 20% of the population, accounting for over 800 responses, with York with 25%, not quite hitting 500. What are we doing to address this in future consultations? Because the gaps got even bigger than it was last year between York and the rest of the area.
Thanks. So I don't disagree with you, as in it is frustrating that we don't really need to do any work in some parts of the region to get a representative sample, and in other parts of the region we need to do a huge amount in order to get those numbers up. Again, I've drawn attention at the beginning to the team who did an amazing job in terms of the numbers of people who responded. So we've got a significant increase overall in the number of people responding to that consultation. And I should say, I think I said this last year, but prior to the Mayor being elected, there used to be £10,000 a year spent on those consultations in terms of telephone surveys. That has not happened since the Mayor was elected. We've spent a few £100s only on social media advertising to make sure that we're targeting the precept surveys in the places where they're needed. I'm particularly frustrated, not just with York, but also with under 40s. Still, I think there's an awful lot of work we need to do, particularly because that is the group that is most likely to be less encouraging of higher percentages, because they're more likely to be struggling financially. So I'm really, really keen that next year, please hold me to account for it next year, that I'm really keen that we get the under 40s number up, and we get better representation from all the kind of urban areas of the region. But thank you. But the team have done an amazing job.
Good. Danny next. Sorry, Mayor. Apologies.
Sorry, I just wanted to come on there. And I'd just like to say that yes, we have seen a large increase in people who respond, which is great. I would say it's not just a challenge we face when we're doing fire and when we're asking out for precept. through the CA, whenever we're doing work, when we're trying to engage with the public, it's a very similar story we are seeing. So obviously we need to look at those factors and how we can best address them, because it's not just when we're doing precept, it's when we're engaging with community groups, organisations across the patch. It's a very similar picture. We do have these pockets where we're just not getting that engagement. So we need to work out how we can best engage with those. And if it is, again, working with local authorities, if it's working with community groups, those sort of people who are really embedded in those communities, that might be one to explore further. But I just say it isn't just on precept where it's right across the board, actually. So we do need to look at new ways of being able to get into those people who are unfortunately just not being engaged in this process at the minute.
Yeah, it's just really an observation. If 15% of the population of York are students, they wouldn't be eligible for this survey, am I right? Because they're not council taxpayers. And if you're seeing perhaps more young people not able to live independently, i.e. living at home because rent costs are so high in York, I'm just putting that in as an observation that could potentially be excluding a whole community and population purely because they can't afford to live out.
I mean, the only thing I would say is it's really important that we get consultation responses from the people who will be paying the council tax bills that we are asking them to pay. So I take the point, I think, but there are plenty of people living across our region who are under the age of 40. So I do think this is a doable thing. I just think we need to think about it slightly more creatively. And as David said, it's not just a problem for the police and fire precept surveys. This is just a wider issue that we just need to keep on top of.
I'll go to Danny now.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Final sort of double-pronged question from me. And again, I'm really supportive of the strategy around reserves. I can see your financial planning to increase those by percentage of net budget revenue, I think NBR stands for. And that relates to my question on reserves. So North Yorkshire is third lowest in the National League table for cash reserves, but that hides the sort of picture. I wondered if it was similar around percentage of net budget revenue, because I can't find that information. And I'm really not sure of where we sit by proportion. Though I am, of course, supportive from previous discussions we've had in previous years about financial resilience. So there's that one to ask. And then a second one, just about whole-time firefighter numbers, a reduction of 11 over the next few years. And I just wondered if there's a reasoning for that. There's usually a reason, maybe there's retirement, but if you could just outline an explanation on that, be really appreciative.
So thank you for the question. In terms of reserves, so we are building up our general reserves to be 5% of our net budget requirement. There's generally a requirement for you to explain to the government if you go above 5%. So that's what we're aiming for. We think that's an appropriate level for us to have in terms of the risks. What we don't have in North Yorkshire that other fire and rescue services have is massive amount of money that they've built up for other things. So their investments in estates, for instance, or their other areas where they might set aside money. So I'd still say we were on the lower side of reserves nationally, but we are building those up. The thing that I would suggest that we've got that the other fire and rescues now don't have is if the organisation was to get itself into a difficult position, we do have more flexibility than the others because of the precept flexibility. So whilst I'm not saying you would want to use that, it does provide us with flexibility that if we do need more money, that could be considered in the future. But I think we shouldn't be about hoarding money in reserves. We should be making sure it manages risks and then making sure we invest in the right places. And I think we've got the balance right now as we build up those reserve levels.
Thank you. And just to second that, I don't want to be a chief. I'm quite happy to be at the lower end of the reserves table, because services then that have got large reserves have got a problem getting that cash out. And there's the public out there and the firefighters that need that money moving through. We do need a reserve strategy, as Michael always brilliantly manages for us and gives us a little bit of, we need something, of course, to absorb shocks in there. But for us, the strategy is to deliver it to the front line as opposed to collect taxpayers' cash and put it in the bank. So I'm happy as a chief in that space that what we're doing here. On the point of firefighter numbers, that relates last risk and resource model prior to this community risk management plan on the Harrogate and Scarborough posts. So there's been no changes to that. That's still just part of the delivery mechanism that we're going through. There were no further reductions in that space. Thank you, Councillor.
I think, Andrew, your final question on this topic.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to follow up in relation to flooding. It is 10 years since the Boxing Day floods impacted on York, and I was very conscious of the sterling work that the fire service did in response to that, keeping critical infrastructure functioning so that the hospital could continue its work despite the floods around some of the substations, and recognising that whilst there was a lot of work went into the pit review about critical infrastructure nationally, it's not all been implemented. So there's still a lot of responsibility residing with emergency services to keep those running when we have flooding events, and with more frequent intense rainfall, that is putting even greater pressures on. So in terms of additional kit that you would require specifically for that, and recognising that urban areas do get hit as much as rural areas with this, I'd really like to see the response from government to this, and recognising that North Yorkshire wouldn't be a unique situation. There are other forces in a similar situation. So it's seeing how that response is made nationally to what is an increasing need from community to be to have that facility to respond in flooding incidents.
I agree. There are a number of areas ultimately. So fire and rescue services, as you know, has been explained many times here, and you know, the panel supports. We don't have a statutory duty, as you allude to, but that doesn't mean that we still don't have a moral imperative to respond, and we will always do that. There is statute, and in the 2004 Act, that we will respond to all emergencies. And that's where chiefs and firefighters do respond in there. Ultimately, that does require funding, and it does put a pay pressure on the service. But nonetheless, we have the MTFP, we have that balanced budget, and we will still continue to do what we're doing for the public. Thank you.
Thanks. Just one other thing I was just going to add in terms of the representations that the Mayor and I have been making to government around fire funding in particular, is around trying to ensure that we are at the heart of national resilience in some of this space. So obviously we have a lot of flooding in the region. We also have the wildfire. Actually, in terms of those national resilience to climate related challenges, we are a region who will be at the kind of the coalface of that going forward, almost certainly, and therefore we're just trying to make sure that we're making clear and strong representations to government about the role that we feel we can play in that space, not least if there's some money attached to it to help to sustain the service, and also just that, again, that funding gap that we had inherited 2 years ago from the precept freeze between 2011 and 2014, that gap that we managed to deal with last year, that is one of the ways in which we are able to shore up the service so that it can provide that emergency response when it's needed. Because like we said, if Langdale had happened and we hadn't done that precept rise, I don't know that we'd be having this conversation in this way.
Any other members' questions? No, thank you. Members, we can either go into private session, or I can seek a roundtable agreement on the Mayor's proposals. Does any member see any need to go into private session? Okay, well, in that case, can I ask for a show of hands in support of the Mayor's proposals? Anybody against? Okay. It's the panel's recommendation that the Mayor's proposals for fire and rescue be approved. We'll prepare our statutory report to the Mayor with these recommendations. So thank you.
Thank you everyone for your support on that. It's much appreciated.
Schoolboy error. Agenda item 10, members' questions. We have a couple of questions which have been already submitted to Deputy Mayor in advance of this meeting from Fraser. Fraser, I'll invite you to go through the question, then I'll ask the Deputy Mayor to speak to response. So over to you, Fraser.
Thank you, Chair. Did you want me to read out the question? I was more than happy with the written response given to the first one. It was a very comprehensive answer I was given. I thought it detailed the procurement process excellently.
I think it'd be useful for the record if you summarised your question.
Yeah, certainly. The first question I submitted was regarding one of the groups that receives funding through the Deputy Mayor's office. My 14-year-old daughter received an application form from school from the Youth Commission earlier this month. One of the questions asked on the application form to my 14-year-old daughter was what her sexuality was. It asked that question to any applicant who was aged 10 or above. It also then asked 3 questions which conflated sex with gender. I was concerned that they were asking 10-year-old children what their sexuality was, so I wrote to the company involved. I wrote to the group involved. They sent me quite a dismissive reply initially, so I replied showing them the legislation regarding this before I received a further reply from them. And in credit to them, they did change completely their application form, omitting these questions and tidying up the wording. Based that this was a group that receives funding from the Deputy, from the Mayor's office, I did want to just seek reassurances that we were doing due diligence on all companies who we were given funding to, and I received quite a good written response from this, and I was satisfied that we are following all the procurement requirements for this. The second question I asked, Chair, was prior to all of these meetings, I always go onto our dashboard just to have a look at the call response times to 101 and 999. And although not highlighted in this question, I did say how impressed I was with the response time. But because I've seen the dashboard, I thought I'm just going to read the whole dashboard that's presented before me. And on reading the whole dashboard, I noticed that the stop and search policies relate to gender. Last year, following the Supreme Court rule, the National Police Chiefs Council gave a really specific ruling that all searches, and I quoted in my question, that thorough police searches which expose intimate body parts should be carried out by police officers of the same biological sex as the detained person. I've asked a couple of times before around about just to ensure that we're complying with the law, and I just wanted to ensure that we were compliant with the law, because on the report on the dashboard, it talks about gender, and the Police Force Commissioner were very, very specific. It had to be around about sex, and I was just seeking reassurance that we're compliant with the law here.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thanks. And if it's okay, Fraser, we will come back to you in writing on both of those points. But I will also, I've got an online public meeting with the police service on Friday, where that data will be. I'll try and remember to pick it up during that online public meeting separately, but we'll come back to you anyway in writing. But if I remember, I'll try and ask it in the meeting as well.
Are there any other members who've got questions? In that case, sorry, Mags, I missed you.
Thank you. Yeah, my question was just, now that we've got the long-awaited violence against women and girls strategy from the government, I just wanted to know if there was any kind of update on what's next locally for York and North Yorkshire in this space.
Thank you. Lots is is the short answer to your question. So it was published shortly before Christmas, and the focus of the new strategy is around a focus on prevention and early intervention, which obviously aligns completely with the objective of our police and crime plan. But the other focuses of the government strategy around the pursuit of perpetrators and support for victims, which I'm sure Mags, you'll have been delighted to read. So I think I've been working with the team at the PFC just to work out how we best approach this. We're convening a meeting with strategic stakeholders in the coming weeks. I also want to make sure I'm speaking directly to victims and survivors about their views on the strategy and whether they think it is doing everything that it needs to do. But I think the real opportunity is going to be in terms of ensuring that we're convening all partners from all sectors as part of the delivery of this strategy. And I'm already talking to combined authority colleagues about how we do that, particularly using the combined authority opportunities in terms of the relationships with local businesses and transport operators, but also health partners, education, and of course the voluntary community sector and the police and fire partners. But in short, there'll be a lot, and I'm working with the team locally to deliver that strategic roundtable with our key stakeholders relatively quickly, so that we can actually just test the things that we're thinking about before we get too far down the track.
Members, I'll look around the chambers. I've not missed anybody else who wants to raise a question. Caroline.
Thank you, Chair. It was really in response to the work around the local resilience forums, and the answer there was talking about the community asset register. And I just wondered if you could outline exactly where we're at with that. It mentions going out to a contractor, I think, and you know, what the timeline is for actually working on that, what existing records you'll be accessing for it as well. Thank you.
Chair, if it's okay, I'll come back to you in writing, Caroline, if that's okay.
Caroline, could you just clarify what paper you're referring to?
Annex A of the questions. It's page, actually, it's not a page number on it. Oh, page 98. So it might be in the next batch of questions. Sorry, folks, if I've.
Thank you, Caroline. Diane just wanted to clarify for the minutes. Yeah. Thank you. Members, if there is no other questions, I'll move on to agenda item 11, shared service collaboration between policing and fire and rescue. Deputy Mayor, we've read the report. Are there any points that you would like to add?
Thank you, Chair. I think I just wanted to thank panel really, because I think I know that you have been focused on this area for quite some time, and I think it's helpful that this paper has come through to panel, and I think that I think it would be fair to say that the narrative of what has been happening has been that there was a lot promised at the very beginning of the collaboration, and that actually the reality of delivering some of that change has probably been slightly harder than was anticipated. And the lesson that I would take from that, not that I was a part to the decision originally, was that actually the process for oversight and assurance perhaps wasn't as strong as it could have been at the conception stage of that collaboration, and that is something that I would commend panel for having been robust in that space over the last few years. Just a few things that I wanted to draw your attention to was just around the assurance framework and the assurances that I seek through the Strategic Oversight Board that I chair in terms of the chiefs and the delivery in that space. And I hope that you would expect me to be a critical friend in that space, but that is the role that I try and take. But I also try and ensure that I am amplifying the voices and concerns of members of the public and the voices from people on this panel who are independent members, and also that we're all striving to improve our public services through the work that collaboration is doing. And just in the annex which has been provided, just a few key things to draw people's attention to. that the improvements around IT and transport and logistics support were really incredibly helpful during the Langdale incident in terms of connectivity, agility and servicing. And I think I'll let the fire chief come in if he wants to, but just I think it would be fair to assume that we may not have had all of those capabilities in the fire and rescue service had we not had some of that collaboration. I'm really pleased that the radio coverage at the York Designer Outlet has now been resolved, and that's been again thanks to that collaboration work around ICT. That was a real risk and problem not that long ago, and that has been resolved thanks to the work of those shared services. There's a big long list, but also just the financial management of budgets, I think again is in a much more robust position than it was, and I would certainly commend Louise in the finance team at NYP and NYFRS for the work that they do, ensuring that we're getting the information that we need in terms of seeking those assurances. And then just the refurbishment in Ripon as a really tangible thing around the improvements to the estate. I do think we need a lot more progress in that space, but we've just been talking about the budget position. So the more we can do collaboratively working across the combined authority in that space, the better. But there are some real tangible benefits. We will continue to keep an eye on this very closely, and also to ensure that we're doing as much as we can to recognise the opportunities from the combined authority. That is still a work in progress, but David and I are pushing both combined authority officers and the shared services collaboration around where those opportunities can be delivered. And just the final thing, but the inspectors for both services actually have commended the improvements in shared services in both their recent inspections, although the police one is not yet formally recognised because that inspection report has not yet been published. That's all for now. Do you want to?
Thank you, Chair. Just today, the Deputy Mayor stolen my line there, which was around the look. So the HMI has formally recognised both chiefs in this space, which I think is enormous, but it isn't both chiefs that deserve the recognition in this. Ultimately, whilst we scrutinise what was enabled, it is support services. Support services is a collection of people. They're a collection of people who are extremely dedicated, and without that collection of people, there would be no appliances, there would be no firefighters, because they deliver everything to enable that front line. And they've been through a lot. We know it wasn't brought together, as the report states, in the best way in the first instance, but the two chiefs now, we've turned that around. We have a new entity now, we have a support services, and it's on the right trajectory, and we'll maintain that. But we must never forget the people element of this. Those people are scrutinised more or less constantly because they are a collaboration. Because as the fire inspectorate walked out of the door, the police inspectorate walked in. So those people are under constant pressure, and they continue to deliver, and I applaud them for that. Thank you.
I very much welcome this report. I sat on the panel at the time this was originally introduced. There was a lot of promises made by the first commissioner in terms of the savings that were going to be produced. It formed part of the case for taking over the fire and rescue service. I never saw those savings coming through in the way it was suggested, so expectations were not managed initially very well. We had a managing director that was appointed, then disappeared from it, and then enable to me then became a dirty word. And I welcome the way you've approached this, and I welcome the report, because I do believe that there is savings with the two services working together closely in the supportive area. I'm very happy to take any question from any members on this. Chris, thank you.
Yeah, it's not a question. It's just to back up what Jonathan said. You invited us, Jonathan, and a few members did come to a presentation down the road a couple of months back now, November, wasn't it? And the head of shared services was there and gave a very, very good address, pulling everything together. And I must say, I in person was really impressed with that. And obviously, you've got the right person in that role, and she stressed how she did work with both forces as well. So I'm entirely comfortable with what you've done and the two chiefs working together and how you're progressing this. I think you're getting it right.
More question from any members? Mags.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think I provided some quite robust feedback at a previous panel meeting, but reading this report, it is really positive and really well done, because I know it's been quite a journey to get here, but it seems much clearer now on what will be done together and what won't be done together. And I think that's really helpful. Thank you.
Any more questions from members? In that case, thank you for the report, and we'll note the report. I'll move on to agenda item 12, Community Risk Management Plan, page 87 to 90, members of your bundle. The paper updates us further following the report that was received our last meeting. Deputy Mayor, we've read the report. Is there anything you'd like to add or highlight in particular?
So I, with permission, Chair, I think it probably makes sense for the Fire Chief to say initial remarks, and then I might just add something on the additional assurances that I saw off the back of the consultation that I think we brought to panel a couple of meetings ago.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think in the first instance, this community risk management plan represents the financial position that the service is allowed to be in now as a result of the investment that was made by the Mayor and Deputy Mayor on there. Because we were able to now transition the service in this CRMP, instead of a save to survive, this is truly now an opportunity for us to invest to improve. And that's the direction of North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service. This CRMP clearly states and stipulates what we intend to do from prevention and protection, as the councillor questioned earlier, on being embedded within the communities. And it also articulates the operational and our response commitments and demands that we're meeting. You'll note within the CRMP, there is specific reference to the improvements we've made, being the most improved in the UK around the response times, which I think is, again, extraordinary for a service that we've achieved within that funding and that timeline. Now, the two areas that we went out to consult upon were effectively an additional extension into an existing policy, which was around automatic fire alarms. This includes, and we were right to be scrutinised by the Deputy Mayor on how and what we were doing with this. Ultimately, we're not turning something off. We're holding people to account for the responsible persons of those premises and making sure that we support them, that we educate them, and where necessary, of course, it is the only part where we have an enforcement perspective within the communities. And that's what the automatic fire alarms was about. It then frees up the time for us and our staff for training. It reduces cost for the response that we're doing and reduces the risk to the communities as the appliances are driving around. All in all, this also brings us in line with regional and national fire and rescue services. Automatic fire alarms still represent around 50% of fire and rescue calls nationally. Now, that's enormous. And clearly, there are still a number of work streams we need to do and a number of areas we need to step into to make sure that we address those. There will always be automatic fire alarms, and there will always be issues. Our point is that where there is life risk or where it is a significant, where it is a fire, we will of course respond and we will extinguish that fire. Where it isn't, we highlight the need then for education and enforcement where required, but we ultimately work with our communities. We haven't had to have any significant enforcement in North Yorkshire for a long period of time. We're taking that as a positive position that we're working with businesses to do that. But of course, where we need to, we will. On the second part, which was the water bowsers, this was an area where, once again, we talked around the fleet earlier. It's an aging fleet. I think those two vehicles ultimately could be some of the oldest in the country, but it comes down to the resourcing to risk. Where those bowsers are not utilised, you wouldn't then put significant amount of funding into those areas. What we're saying is, from the risk modelling that we've done, and again with the community asset register, utilising other contractors or other people within those spaces, we can utilise that money better somewhere else within the estate. And that's what that was about. Resourcing to risk for what we need with the bowsers, making sure we're providing mitigations across the county and in support of our operational response, but also recognising we don't need both of those vehicles. There are other things we can do and transitioning that money into another area. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
If I may, I just wanted to add, I think I may have mentioned some of this when I was here last time, and it is in the paper, but I just wanted to draw panel's attention to the additional assurances that I saw on both measures in terms of automatic fire alarms. my concern was around particularly commercial premises in remote areas where we would have the kind of combined risk, if you like, of it being less likely that a fire would be spotted if it was a genuine fire, and that the response time from a fire appliance would be longer because it was in a rural community. And so I sought additional assurances that there would be additional work done with businesses in those areas to ensure that that change wasn't going to have a risk of a disproportionate impact on businesses in rural areas. And the second one around the water bowser provision, actually I think the important thing was around the scale of what we actually need, because actually at Langdale we had 15 water bowsers as well as a helicopter and all kinds of other things going on, and actually we're never going to have all of that equipment available to the fire and rescue service at one time. What we really need are those partnership arrangements to be in place so that if major incidents do happen, that we're not beholden to the whims of businesses in terms of how much they charge, that actually we've got those agreements in place already when we need to call on them, and that other statutory bodies like Yorkshire Water recognise their responsibilities in that space. And again, I've made representations to them to ensure that if there were multiple major incidents in Yorkshire, for example, which is not beyond the realms of possibility, that actually Yorkshire Water had got arrangements in place to make sure that all of their responsibilities were being met, and that we wouldn't be left high and dry because their own bowsers were being in demand in other places, and they would obviously also understandably prioritise residential areas if there was a drought, for example, and they needed to provide drinking water. But if you had a drinking water requirement and a wildfire going on simultaneously, actually my challenge to them was to make sure that they had enough resource to meet their statutory responsibilities as well. So I just wanted to give panels additional assurances about what we have done since the consultation took place. But that CRMP decision was formally made a couple of months ago.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Thank you. We will note that this report, and we'll move on to agenda item 13, progress and issues raised by the panel. Diane, I believe you're leading on this.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I don't propose to go through each of the actions. There are obviously quite a number from last time, and the report notes where we're up to on all of those, and there's some more information in the Appendix A as well. I suppose just to say, obviously, to note we've got a couple at the top there, points 1 and 2 that are now from May last year, so I think it might be worthwhile just doing a little bit more work outside of this meeting just to sort of see where we're up to and any further updates. I know a particular councillor had a query around point 2 and wanted to provide more information, so we'll see what we can do outside of this. But I think regardless of whether they're noted as completed or partially completed, it's really just for the panel to comment as to whether they think the information in Appendix A sufficiently answers the point raised, and whether there's anything else to pick up on, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I just wanted to go back to the figures that were provided on the SARC. I absolutely understand that sometimes people that are in York and North Yorkshire may go to a SARC in another region, but I don't think we've sufficiently bottomed down how many people are coming from out of area into York to the SARC that is funded by York and North Yorkshire. So it was just really, I don't think that's very clear from the answers that have been given on page 96.
I'll happily get some additional clarification. I think the other issue is that some victims from our region may choose to go to a SARC in another region, particularly in the north of our region. That would be wouldn't be unheard of. I also, just Chair, with permission, just wanted to apologise for the number 1. And I have had a meeting with the CPS, so huge apologies because my meeting was focused on violence against women and girls, and I missed that I needed to raise something else with them. So with permission, I'll raise it in writing with them and ensure that you get a full answer in writing before, maybe not before the next meeting. I was going to say before the next meeting, but it's in 2 weeks, so maybe not, as quickly as we can.
Thanks. 2 very quick comments. question 13 was one I'd asked at a previous meeting about the Community Safety Serious Violence Fund. You do have to provide an update in Appendix A and on page 101, and it was just to say to members, click that hyperlink, because there are 14 different projects being funded right across from Ribble Marshals on the Ouse, Knife Crime in Schools, the Youth Centre. It's a brilliant example of some of the work that's done, but it's really hidden away unless you click on that hyperlink. So just say to members, take 2 minutes, go and click on that link on page 101. There's a brilliant variety of projects on there. The other one is just to thank again. I asked at question 16 about other fraud when we were dealt with a paper on online fraud and financial fraud. I didn't think the details were sufficient previously. That site that has now been produced now is superb for online fraud reporting, alphabetising everything, any sort of online fraud. It's a really easy, clear way to follow. And I hope that this is something that we're going to be promoting and publicising widely, because I think it's a really clear, good site and is so much better than stuff we've seen in the past. So I just wanted to highlight both of these. Thank you.
Well, I'll just say thank you. Other than actually, thank you for pointing out all the brilliant stuff that's hidden in a link, because I feel like we should be doing some more with that, but thank you.
Yeah, apologies for nipping out. I have got a call. It was just on number 3 that it was resolved. I mentioned to gentlemen who wear and ladies who wear a lot of blue that I'd contacted the mayor, Deputy Mayor's office, and surprisingly the gentleman went round to speak to the miscreants and agreed that they would pay what they should pay. So thank you for that.
Any more from members? Are we happy with the exception of what's just currently been made, that those ones that Diane has identified as being fully completed, that we sign them off? Sorry,
Chair, if I may, on question 10, which is the Langdale Moor fire update. So the fire investigation report has been completed internally. It's now going through our quality assurance mechanisms, and then we will look to then publish in the near future through a formal process. Thank you.
I think we'll keep that open because we are particularly interested in whether Michael manages to get the money back for you. Not that there's any pressure.
Of course, but as an update, there is still significant progress there. Yes,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything else? So, Diane, I think what we'll do, other than the ones that members have raised now, we'll close off the rest of them. Super. Can I move on to agenda item 14, work programme? Do members have any comments or addition for the work programme? Thank you. If you don't want to raise it now, could you email Diane with anything you want to alter in that space? Agenda item 15, any other items? There are none. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I could bring this to the next meeting, but I might forget. So I just wanted to bring it to this one, just to draw panel's attention that the National Rural Crime Network's annual conference will be in York on the 24th of March. And it is going to be focused on the theme of rural vulnerability, tackling critical issues such as rural domestic abuse and sexual violence, isolation and mental health challenges, the human cost of rural heritage and wildlife crime. So it's in York, it's by the station, it's at the, I can't remember the name, whatever the hotel is right by the station. That's right, the Milner. And it's on the 24th of March. I think if you look up the National Rural Crime Network online, you can just click a link to register your interest. Pretty sure it's free because we subscribe and pay subs into the National Rural Crime Network. So if people are interested, particularly as panel members, I just thought that might be something that you would want to attend because it doesn't involve much travel.
So there is no other items. Item 16, date of the next meeting. I'll just remind you that is Thursday, the 5th of February at 10:30 in County Hall. Main item is the policing precept. So this brings us to the end of the meeting. May I thank everybody, members, for attending. Mayor, will you pass our thanks on to the Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and for your team attending and contributing today. Diane, will you please confirm that the broadcast is finished?